Good morning, everybody. Sure do appreciate all of you making it out. Especially glad to see some visitors. Some of you folks I recognize, but don't recall your name. So yeah, stick around. We've got a few refreshments back here. So yeah, stick around. We'll have a break in between the 10 and 11 o'clock sessions. But yeah, feel free to make your way back there and get some snacks. So I am going to introduce our speaker, Drake Jenkins. So as many of you know, Drake is from Tennessee. His wife, Stokely, and him, they live in Clarksville, Tennessee. And they've got two girls, Lakin, who's almost 8, and Sadie, who is 5. Drake is a Freed-Hardeman graduate, and he's a professor down there. He teaches Bible at Freed-Hardeman. He also teaches at Lipscomb, teaches social science there. So anyways, without any further ado, I will turn it over to Drake.
All right. Thanks. Okay. Well, glad that you're here, and a lot to tell you in a little bit of time. Is this too loud? Am I echoing? I'm not? Okay. Okay, it's fine. If my wife were here, she would have said yes, so there you go. All right, so let me say a few ground rules that might help just a little bit. First off, I am no expert, and so please don't assume that. Second off, a lot of what I share is what most of you could share, and so I'm also mindful of that. I am inadequate to do the things that I get to do, but I'm humbled and thankful that we took on a project a few years ago, and we get to speak all over the country now, and it's kind of bizarre. And a lot of things that I've heard is, you say stuff that we know, we just sometimes need to rehear it. So if you're looking for, when Drake leaves today, we're going to know exactly how to view the church through an appropriate lens. I hope you will. I really do. But also I hope that you're just encouraged to kind of reconsider some things. Another rule, some of the things that I'll say are me saying from an eyewitness observer, and it's not getting on anybody. It's just I report on things that I see. I'm a researcher at heart, and so part of the reason I think you brought me in here is to respond to things that I've seen. And so I will just randomly drop those things in. Do anything you want with them. It does not matter to me. But again, that's what my life's work has been about, essentially. And so be mindful of that. Number 3, I love the church more than anything else. She has done more for me than anything. And so I'm thankful to belong to her. I'm thankful to belong to Jesus. I've preached for the last 15 years, and a lot of what I'm going to share with you today is stuff that we've been able to do. And so that's unique. I know how to shrink a church, and I know how to grow a church, and I've done both. That's how I know. Okay, I'm not an expert. I just know how to do things wrong and a few things right. So all that said, today we're going to talk about the visitor's view. And you don't know me. Some of you are here today because you thought Dale was coming. Sorry. He's not. But let me tell you who I am. I'm Dale's nephew, and Jeff's nephew. Some of y'all know Jeff and Dale and the Jenkins Institute, and so that's fine. Love those men so dearly. Their baby sister is my mama. That's how I'm in the Jenkins family. And so someone even brought up Jerry and Mamie from Birmingham. That's my mama and papa, or what was my mama and papa. Those two people raised me. I grew up with them in their home, and mom and my twin brother, and we have an older brother that's 9 months older than us. And so I know the faces every time I say that. All right, but that's real. So, all right, so I've been doing ministry and seen ministry done most of my life. And I've always wondered, essentially, why do some churches do well? And by well, you have to define some of these terms. Because if a church is 50 people forever, but they all love the Lord, that could fall into some parameter of well, right? I mean, you could define that in some particular parameter. They're not serving heresy, so to speak, and so that's fine. That's good. Well is a conversation piece regarding like health, and so that's good. if a church went from 50 to 300, a lot of people would say they're doing well, and so that's fine too, but you need to define that parameter too. And so how do we take all of what we see and sort of put it into this one question, and that is, how do we change the world? Because I don't know about you, but I feel like I'm a world changer. And so I want you to be world changers. And so how do we do that? And the question is, you have to begin with where you are. What am I doing right now, or what am I not doing right now that may help me or hurt me from changing the world? And so all of us have to do that. And it's so much more than just a church thing. And what I think, and I could be wrong about this, though 85% of individuals that attend a church cannot argue why they do the things that they do within that church. And that's a real number, 85%. That is to say, if I were to say something simple as, why are we a cappella? It's bizarre to me that a lot of people would simply say, because the Bible says to be. Well, that's a fair answer, but you need to be able to back that up. There's 7 times in the New Testament that the Bible speaks about singing. All 7 times it gives attention to a cappella, but you need to be able to back up the scriptures if you can't, aside from what my preacher said that instruments are of the devil. Well, they're not. I play guitar. I just don't do it in a worship assembly. So to say we don't believe in instruments is a poor response, because if you don't believe in instruments, I promise they're real. Okay, and so you have to sort of unpack why we do what we do, and that's important. Or you're a part of the 85% that sits in the room and complains about everything that there is. And you don't want to be that person. I mean, you don't want to be the problem in every solution. So that's a part of it. And everything that you do is seen by someone. And that's the part of it. Everything that you do is seen by someone. And so when I started this research, and again, I'm an inadequate individual. I went to Freed-Hardeman, got a degree in Bible. I got my master's in Bible, and then got a PhD in social sciences. And my whole life, my work has essentially been for the last 3 years regarding my terminal degree. What do people see when they walk in? What do we see when people walk in? And it's bizarre, the answer to those questions. It's bizarre now, what are people looking for? And it's challenging to unpack that. It's hard to know that 35% of millennials will not enter into a building that has a steeple. That's hard to know. It's just hard to know. It's not bad. It's not good. It's just something that you can know. Why? Because they assume that has some connection to traditionalism, and traditionalism has some connection to this sort of authoritarian orality. And people don't like that in that small particular group. And so you need to be mindful of that. I'm not telling you to go get a chain and knock your building down. I'm just saying there are some things that are hard to know. Every time I pull into a building, I always circle the building just to see what I don't see. And so we're going to unpack some of that in the second lecture of this. But there are already some things that I might say as just a random human that visited your building, what you might consider. Okay, but before we do anything else, I want us to first understand what is communication. Because again, this is what my background is in. So what I did over the last 3 years is I toured the top 10 largest churches and fastest growing churches in America. And this was the parameters of my study. Okay, and this was exciting, but you need to know a couple of things about this. Okay, first off, there's statistics all over the place that define what's the biggest, what's the largest, what's the most producing, what's the most reproducing, et cetera, et cetera. And so my board that we set down when you have to defend, we sat down and that was the parameter. Number one, we're not going to do international, though the largest churches are not actually in America. Congregation bodies are not in America, and that's intriguing. Okay, but we're going to do America, and they have to be fastest growing, and they have to be the largest. They have to be both of those. And so we're going to look at 10 of those, and we went all over the country. And the way that this was, it was sort of a qualitative research. This observation moment, so to speak. So we didn't do a ton of interviews. We did some, but the major part of it was walking into these rooms and writing down based on some criteria what we saw or what we didn't see. And it was really telling. And one of the things that I learned was this: there's not a Church of Christ in the top 10 fastest growing, largest churches in America. There's not a Church of Christ in the top 100 fastest growing, largest churches in America. There's not a Church of Christ in the top 1,000 fastest growing and largest churches in America. That was problematic to me, and so we're going to build one, and we're going to be on that list. That's my goal. That's my 10-year goal, is to be on the top 10 list. I have weird goals, but I think we'll do it because I know we will. Okay, so there. All right, so why is that? Well, that's something to consider, but let's go in and step into these congregations and see what they're doing. Now, I always like to say this, and some churches need me to say this, some audiences need me to say this, some audiences could care less. I was there as a researcher, not as a worshiper, and I just hope you hear that appropriately, okay? So I was there to see what was happening, and it was unique, and what we're learning is people show up to churches primarily because of communication. And that's true across all social science boards. If people stay in marriages or walk away from marriages for communication, y'all all know that, right? What is the biggest struggle in marriage? We have to talk to each other. Okay, that's true, right? And there's two people, so you have to be mindful of that. And so the reason people stay together is because they communicate well. The reason people don't is because they negated that concept, right? Same with businesses, customer service. The reason companies do really well is because they understand how to communicate with customer service. Last night I flew in pretty late, and I was trying to get my rental car, and they somehow canceled my appointment. And I said, well, that's a real bummer because I live not here. And so they said, well, what do you want us to do about that? That was what they asked me. Now, again, as a researcher, I'm always thinking, like, how would I have responded? And at 10:30 at night, I wouldn't have looked at someone and said, well, what do you want me to do? And so I responded with, I'd like the fanciest car you have, because that is what I wanted. And so they said no, and I tried to laugh, and it was only me laughing, like most of the time. And so I said, look, I don't know how we solve this, but I'm trying to get to a hotel that's 15 minutes from here. So we can get a car. I don't mind jumping in with you. What car do you drive? And again, just one person laughing. Okay, and so we unpacked it, and I said, do you have a manager? And I'm smiling, and I'm trying to be playful, and because it's a long day. And after long days, you're more frustrated, and they didn't have food on the plane because there was turbulence, and that was a real bummer. And the lady next to me was scared to death, and God help her, but she didn't want to talk, and I like talking to people, and that was a bummer. And so I'm and I don't have my family, and that's a bummer. And so anyway, so I said, can I speak to your manager? And the manager came out, and you could tell that the manager knew how to handle these situations. And he came out smiling, and he said, he looked at the screen, he said, Mr. Jenkins, we've canceled your reservation. It's on us. It's not on you. And instantly, you know how I felt? I didn't care about not having the car because they validated me. I could care less. I would have walked to this church with a smile because he saw me. He didn't see some random person or some client or something. He saw me. And that's what we have to do if we're going to grow. We have to see them. Not what they were, not what you want them to be, what they are. Because every person that walks into every situation has a story. And your job is to see them, right? Your job is to see them. And most of the time, people walk into churches because other people or other places are unwilling and unable to. And so communication, what is it? Well, from a scholarship position, if you were to define communication, it's elusive. And that's not fair. And so you could look up right now, there are in periodical searches, 100 known and validated definitions of communication. 100, that's a lot. That's like, what? Okay, and so thus the being elusive. And so what I did was I came up with a definition that I think might help us just a little bit. And so I want you to think about this, especially as we go through all of these lectures. I want you to hang on to what this particular definition is, because again, if we can learn what this is, then I think we can sort of begin to unpack how we move forward to growth. So this is why I wanted a board. By the way, I have a PhD, but I can't spell, and so this is where you turn the live stream off. JK. All right, communication is a systemic process. Man, that's key, yeah? Let's start there. Okay, it is a systemic process. Now, what in the world does that mean? Well, it's elusive, and so there's 100 ways to describe this, but one of the things you have to be mindful of, is this, okay? Because this is what tells you what this means. So if I'm unpacking this in a lecture, then I need to understand, okay, if this is a way to integrate or to interpret, that's what this word means, right? And the rest of it is integration, right? And interpretation. And that's hard because interpretation has its own sort of ambiguity, right? I mean, that's interpretation at its core. You can't help but to interpret individuals and aesthetics and responses. I mean, it's its own ambiguity, and so you need to be mindful that just because you think you're doing something doesn't necessarily mean you're doing it. Just because you're saying something doesn't necessarily mean you're saying it, and that's the hard part about this. And so bear with us. So communication is systemic, and so what is the system then? That's all that means. What is the system then of this process or of this interpretation as it alludes to this, the communication aspect? And the system is simply you. And so, well, great. What does that mean? Well, it means that every time you come to the table, each of you come with your own what? System. And no system is the same. And so let's make this simplistic. How many of you in this room go to church here? This is your church home by show of hands. Okay, many of you. Okay, how many of you believe the exact same thing about everything? Okay, well, that's not good. You should all leave. Okay, so that's the point, right? The point is you can be in the same, you can inhabit it. You can be in the same culture. You can be in the same place. You can be in the same sort of sphere of influence. You can be in the same ideology approach, but your systems are always going to be the same. And if your systems are going to be the same, then the process is going to struggle getting to this integration and interpretation. Does that make sense to y'all? And so how do you deal with that? Well, you have to learn the system. There was a Russian linguist, Bakhtin, B-A-K-T-A-I-N, Bakhtin, and he was bizarre. He was brilliant, but all brilliant people are also typically crazy. And so that's just true. I mean, read Einstein's notes, and it's like, really? Okay, so bear with us. But Dr. Bakhtin, this Russian linguist, said, the biggest struggle with growing any organization is what he called the already spokens that come with every system. And this is brilliant. It's absolutely brilliant. It truly is. And I'm going to write that on the board. The already spokens. Okay, and some of you are like, I wish he had a PowerPoint so we didn't have to look at this. But this is more engaging, I think. And I'm the speaker, so I get to do it this way. All right, so already spokens, and what does that mean? Now, this is the hard part, y'all, so I want you to hear this. Every time you encounter someone, they have individual interpretive ambiguity, but they also have this integrated connection through something that's already happened. And it's not always singular. And that's unfair, but it's absolutely true. It's like, what does that mean? This is what it means. Have you ever had a conversation with an individual, let's say in Springfield, Missouri? That's where we're at, right? Springfield, Missouri. And you mention something about where you go to church because you always talk about the church because you love it. Because it's the greatest, I mean, the church is the greatest thing in the world. I love it so much. And so you can't help but to talk about things that you love, right? And so that's why when you walked in here, nobody talked about March Madness. You all talked about Jesus. And so if you didn't, you need to come forward as together no, I'm just playing. So, but the idea is you do. And so you're talking to someone outside of this wall and they say, where do you go to church? And you say, well, I go to the Church of Christ. Have you ever had someone sort of say, uh-oh? Now, why are they doing that? Because of the already spokens. It has nothing to do with you. They probably love you. But the problem is they're interpreting what the church is based on already spokens in their system, and it takes one person to ruin the whole system, doesn't it? And that's unfair, but that's true. And so, like it or not, how are you going to deal with that? I mean, how are you going to solve that riddle? And I'll tell you this, you're not going to solve it by talking about how bad other people in other churches are. Shame on us for talking about how bad everything is as opposed to telling people how great Jesus is. Shame on us. And by the way, shame on us when we speak poorly of our own church. Well, we want you to come today and, our pews are not all that comfortable, but we still want you to come. Well, you know what I'm not going to do? I'm not going to come. Well, we want you to come. Our song services, it's okay. And sometimes the PowerPoint people are a slide behind, but it's not bad singing. I'm not coming to that church. Our preacher's, he's fine. I mean, we still pay him and all. I'm not showing up for that. Does that make sense? If you don't build a system and build something, this integration, this already spoken, this that is somewhat sustainable inside of the people that are not yet here, they're never going to come. And so you have to be mindful of that all the time. What am I saying that is going to get people excited about being a part of what I'm excited about being a part of what I'm a part of? And this is true in Christianity, but it's absolutely true in building churches. And what I've learned is we're terrible at this. And I mean that respectfully, but we are awful at this. We would rather, when people come, talk about what we need more of or what the church is doing down the road than talk about what we are. And it's going to kill us. It's going to hurt the church. I don't know if you live in statistics, but the churches of Christ statistically in the West right now are the second fastest dying religion. Now, I won't say what the first one is because I'm not here to blab on people, but we're number 2 and we're pretty close to number 1. And I don't know why that is, but I think a big part of it is this already spoken concept. I'll never forget, this is a terrible story, so let me share it. I was preaching in Ashland City, Tennessee, and it's a small town right outside of Nashville. And it was my first job ever. I was 23 years old, and all I wanted to do was preach. It's all I've ever wanted to do. And so I was working, and I was in grad school. I was working with a guy named Dan Winkler, and I was begging him to get me a job, because if he called them, they had to say yes. And if you know Dan Winkler, you know that's true. And he wanted me to do it, and he loved me through it and prayed me through it, but you got to do it. So I applied to all these churches, and at one point I applied to 18 churches, and 18 churches told me no. 3 of the churches offered me the youth minister job. I still don't know how that happened. I didn't apply for that job, but they said, no, you're too young. We want someone experienced, and that's fine. And so I prayed for them and I asked them to receive Jesus, and then I went on my own. All right. The only reason I ended up in Ashland City is because they're the only people that said yes. And they know that. I spent 10 years with that church. But I remember the Church of Christ had a bad reputation in that town, a very poor reputation. A small town outside of Nashville, but you're 15 minutes from downtown Nashville, but the town had 3,000 people, one of those type places. And I couldn't figure out why. And there was a church, one week we were at this place called Don Pancho's. And every small town has incredible Mexican food. That's just true. They have to. It's in the Bible. And so we went to Don Pancho's, and I watched this guy walk in, this gentleman, and he was going to all the tables and dropping off a card. Just didn't say a word to the table, just dropped a card off. And I thought, well, that's one way to market. I wonder what he's selling. And then he got to our table and he dropped the card off. And I was so excited because I'm always trying to find a way to reach people. And so before he got away, I said, hi, I'm Drake Jenkins. And he said, hello. And he walked off. And I said, what are you doing? Tell me, what are you passing out? And this is what he said. I'm trying to save Ashland City. And I said, well, I'm trying to do that. Let's talk. And he didn't want to talk. And so he walked off. And so I thought, well, okay. So I looked at the card. This is a true story. And the back of the card that I saw, the first part said, turn or burn. And I thought, is that a reference to the food I'm about to eat? And on the back of it, it said, Church of Christ salutes you. And there was just Church of Christ. Well, I preached for Ashland City Church of Christ. So I hated that. You know what I did? I went to every table in that restaurant. I picked up those cards and I sat down with as many people that would, because not everybody likes for you just to join their dinner. Some people like it, not everyone do. Now, usually after 2 minutes, they think I'm crazy or they're playful, And I tried to not hurt that gentleman's feelings, because maybe in his mind he was changing the world, but he was doing it terribly. What a poor job. And he was setting this up for me to fail in Ashland City, and I didn't want that to happen. And so I sat down and I always ask the question, when you read turn or burn, what did that mean to you? And do you know what most people said? This is a lecture, but let's do this for the sake. Because of the card turn or burn and the Church of Christ represented on the back, and I said, what did that mean to you? Anybody, what do you think someone said to that? Anybody? Huh? That's what it was. Well, that's what the Church of Christ teaches. And they were flippant and rolled their eyes at it. It was almost in jest. Well, I mean, that's what y'all do. And I thought, I don't do that. What? And most of these people began to give me the history of churches of Christ in their ideology and their ambiguity and their integration of, well, that's the church in town that basically hates everybody. I don't hate people. Do you? I want people to go to heaven, but I sure don't want them to think I'm the one getting them there. And so I printed up my own set of cards, and I put turn or burn, and on the back I put First Baptist. No, I'm just playing. I did that. That would have been pretty funny, though. But all the names of the churches that weren't us. No, I began to sit down and talk to these people. I want you to tell me what you think about the Church of Christ. Are you willing to have lunch with me next week? You don't have to come to church. If you want to come to church, I preach just up the road, but could I have lunch with you? And I set up lunch appointments with everybody that agreed. And all we did, I let them tell me their view of the Church of Christ. And it was awful. Some of the people had left the churches of Christ, and the number one reason was, well, because they're just a terrible, cold group of people. And so I thought, I need to figure out a way to change that. I was only 23, 24 at the time, and I'm not saying that's true about every Church of Christ. I'm saying that's true about a small town of 3,000 people just north of Nashville. But I wondered if there were other people across the country that sort of felt that way. Do they see us in a way that is not us at all? We're the light of the world, right? I mean, we're a city set on a hill. And so are we sharing that? And so every time someone comes into your life, every time a visitor comes into your view, your sphere of influence, your building, let's say, they come with a system. And so you have to be mindful of that system. And your job is, again, not to necessarily unpack that. And that's what most of us do. When someone walks in, well, hey, are you new here? I love every one of you already. And some of you may not love me yet, but you will, hopefully. But can I caution you not to say that when people walk in? Are you new here? I know that's an intro. I hear that, but that can go one of two ways. Number one, they're not ready to tell you their story because they are new. Or number two, no, we've been here for 5 years. Okay, and that's just a real tough. And if you're shaking your heads, that means you've done that before. I babysit your kids. Oh yeah, I remember you. Okay, so be mindful. So that's not what you say. The first thing that you say is you think about the system. You try to see them past any words, past anything that they're doing. You try to see them past all of the aesthetics. Did you know that there's a lot of single moms that will come into churches with kids, or, maybe they have a husband, but he's working or he's not coming or whatever. But when you look at the statistics, there are more single moms coming with kids than single dads coming with kids. And so that's intriguing. And so when you see that person, what system do you see? Hey, are you new here? Oh my word, how did you hear about us? They don't need to hear that. You know why? Because they've spent the last hour begging their kids to put on shoes and clothes and re-shoes and re-clothes. And did you eat? No. Well, don't tell anybody you didn't eat. And did you brush your teeth? No. Well, eat this mint because I don't want us to be the smelly kids. And did y'all buckle in and stop hating each other? And it's crazy and wild and screaming. And as soon as you get in the parking lot, and it is a nightmare, the mom looks at the kids and says, everybody just shut up and act like you love each other. How are you doing? Oh, we're doing wonderfully today. Godspeed, okay? Because they feel they need to do that when they walk into this building. You know why? Because that's the system we built. When you walk in here, you get it together and you look like you have it together. You know what they need? Your kids look amazing. Did you do this today by yourself? Yeah. Well, why are there tears in your eyes? Well, my husband doesn't help a lot. And I know I shouldn't even unpack this. You should unpack this. You want to go into this room over here and talk? Hey, we don't know you. Do you mind if I let this lady over here, this gentleman, take your kids? We have a Bible class program. I promise they'll love it. They'll do crafts. You can go with them. That's fine. But maybe mom could use a break just to talk a little bit. Hey, could I bring you some water or coffee, or do you need anything? Okay, you sit in that room for a few minutes and just catch your breath. I'm going to make sure your kids are okay, and let's talk. And when you go in there, you just sit. You don't have to say anything, because you know what you've just done? This says, this church loves me and they don't even know me. This church sees me more than the people that I see every day. This church wants me here. They don't know what your beliefs are. They don't know if you're instrumental or a cappella. They don't know if you have a praise team or if you think that's wrong or right. They don't know if you clap at baptisms or not. They know that you see someone that needs them and that you run to their call. You think you can grow a church like that? I do. You think when the people came to the camps on the Outer Banks and they saw all of these apostles preaching, you think the first thing they said was, now, are you a Jew or a proselyte Jew? Now, tell me your thoughts on the Holy Spirit. No, they saw a group of people that saw them. And if you want to grow the church, which I know you do, I mean, I don't know anything about this church yet. I'm imagining on Sunday morning there won't be, y'all have to bring chairs in because this place is packed. But if it's not, are you willing to do something more? Are you willing to do what it takes to break this already spoken and to build a system so that you can integrate with people? Are you willing to go the extra mile? Are you willing to do what others are unwilling to do? Now, we're up against the 10:45. We're going to take a quick break, whatever break you may need, and then we're going to start back around 11. I'm going to say a prayer, but I always want to say this as we sort of break down. Keep this in mind. I'll erase some of this, but I want you to keep this in mind as we get into the next lecture, because I hope, I could be wrong, but I hope you understand at least what communication is at this point. It is a system process of everybody coming to the table with a different system, and I must work through that if I'm going to integrate, which seemingly I want to, even though there is ambiguity, and even though there is already spokens, because I'm trying to build something great. And to do that, I need to make sure we're on the same playing field. Now, some of the scholarship, academic side of it, if I may. the next lecture in a couple of minutes, we're going to talk about pragmatism and how to do that. And that's the point where I might even offer suggestions for this place, and in a very humble way. And I'm always willing to take suggestions. If you think I need to wear better shoes, feel free to come tell me, and I'll consider ignoring you. But whatever it takes, but we're going to work through what that may mean, and I hope it'll do some good. So let's have a prayer. God, we're thankful for this first session. We're thankful for the opportunity to probably hear things we've always heard, but maybe we'll do something about it. Maybe I can be better, God. I want to be better for you. I want to see beyond what I've always seen. I want to look for things beyond what I've always looked for. I want to see people. And part of seeing people is seeing their systems and their processes. I want to learn people. And God, my prayer is that all of us in this room, regardless of where we land on some of this, is that maybe this will help us. Maybe this will light a fire in us to at least be mindful that everybody that walks into our lives are coming with so much more than just a smile. And help us to appreciate that, and help us in sometimes to be mindful when we were in our own valleys and our own deep, dark systems, and someone reached out and help that to sort of spread over into our life. God, help us to not do this because we want to be the best church or the biggest church, but we want to do this because we love people. And God, get us out of the way if we stop loving people. I pray that leaders in churches and speakers in churches, and that if they're not in it for the people, I pray that you get them out of the way. There's an urgency and emergency for soul winning, and people that aren't in it for loving people and loving you, I pray you put a guard over their mouth and help us to get back to the people business. God, I love you, and I know you love us. In Jesus' name, amen. Let's take a short break.
She got
Here we go. Number 2. This session, we're going to talk about some of what we found in our research. And y'all, I love this part. I do. I love a lot of things, but I love this part. Thank you for being here. Thank you for listening. It's funny. Well, funny is not the right word. It's interesting. Several of us have now spoken, and that's a good thing. Many of you shared stories about the time that someone told you something negative about the Church of Christ. That happened over our break, and I find that intriguing. And so it's always telling, but that's okay because we're going to change the world, aren't we? And so we're not worried about that because we're going to set up our own plan. So in this section, I want to talk to you about what we found, and so again, if just to reiterate, we went all over the country and we looked at these fastest growing and largest churches. Now, I can't make this up. Y'all are going to think I am, but I'm not. I was getting on the plane last night. It was from Nashville to Dallas was the first flight, and this was the Dallas flight. And so I'm in group 7, and because that's where they put the people that forget to check in, and so there's this older gentleman in front of me, and he was talking to everybody in the airport, and he had his bag, and he was doing all this, and I love watching people. Can we take that out of the live feed that I just said that? Let me rephrase. I like paying attention to people. That's what I meant to say. And so I'm sort of watching this guy, and in my mind, I've decided he's like a politician or something, because you always look for famous people. I live right outside of Nashville, and I'm in Nashville a lot. You see a lot of famous people, and they tell you to ignore them. Well, they don't know me. I don't ignore them ever. I run up to them and tell them who I am and who they don't know, and all that. And so I'm thinking this guy might be famous. So I literally start Googling. I Google image senators, and I'm trying to find his face. And so I'm literally in the airport looking at him like this. And yes, that's very creepy. But again, that's Drake. So there you go. And I couldn't find his face. And so we get to the thing, and he talks to the lady that checks him in. He scans his phone, and how are you doing? How long you been doing this? I've been doing this. Is this your last shift? Yes, sir. I'm going home. Oh, well, we just appreciate what you're doing. And I was just tickled about that. And then the security people, when you walk in, when you get right before you get on the plane, there are those people that are sort of standing there by the door, and how are y'all doing? We're good. Well, what's y'all's names? And they didn't know. What I knew is no one had ever asked them that question, ever. And he was just fired up about it. What's your name? And they were telling him, and they were kind of leery. And he said, well, I'm such and such. And man, I hope you have a great evening. Isn't it a beautiful evening? And they just kind of grinned and laughed and loved it. And I'm back there just fired up. I'm tickled to death. And so we get where we're rolling, and we end up being pretty close to each other, not next to each other. That was a lady that was afraid of all things, but we were on this side. And so I started talking to him, and I said, who are you? That was my first question. I said it just like that. And he kind of looked at me like, what? And I said, are you a famous person? And he said, I like to think so. And I said, who are you? And he said, I'm such and such. And I said, okay, I don't know you. And he didn't tell me who he was at this point. He said, who are you? And I said, I'm Drake Jenkins. And he said, okay. And like, I thought maybe he'll know. And so anyway, and he said, what are you doing? And I said, I'm flying to Springfield, Missouri. I'm catching a flight there. And he said, I've never been there. And I said, I hear it's a great place, and they've got all kinds of stuff. And he said, you've never been there either. And I said, no, sir, I have not. And so he said, what are you doing there? And I said, well, I'm going to be talking to church about basically what people see when they walk into churches. And he said, well, tell me about that. And so I started telling him. We went around the country, and we did the top 10 churches in America. And he said, was Beamer on that list? And I said, yeah, it's number 4. Have you read my book? And he said, no. And I was so excited. I thought, what are the odds? And he said, I planted that church. And I said, you did? And he said, yeah. And I said, are you still there? And he said, no, I go around the country. And he said, now I do it more internationally, and I'm planting churches, and I'm trying to change the narrative of what church has been in America for the past 50 years. And I said, that's amazing. Do you know Ray? And he said, yeah, I hired Ray. And I said, I love Ray. And he said, everybody loves Ray. And he said, tell me what you love about Ray. And I said, well, every time he talked to me, he looked me in the eye and he smiled. And this is what the guy said, the man that I was talking to. He said, isn't that simple? And I said, I think so. I said, I've seen you talk to everybody in the airport. And I said, I don't know if you noticed, but I was trying to watch you. I was looking at senators trying to find you. And he said, yeah, I saw you holding up your phone. He said, I didn't know if I wanted to talk to you or not. And I said, well, I'm not creepy, which is what a creepy person would say anyway. And so I began to tell him, and he said, well, tell me what you found. Again, this is a church he planted that he's not at. And I began to tell him, it's in a book, and it's got all the stuff. And he said, man, I'm glad they're still doing that. Man, that really made a difference. Hey, what'd you think about this? And I said, can you tell me how you came up with that? I mean, how'd you come up with the stuff y'all do, man? I mean, y'all are number 4 in America. He said he went to the Ritz-Carlton one day, and pretty fancy thing. And he said when he was checking in, he paid attention to how he was greeted at the door. And he said those people acted like he owned the place. And And he wasn't fancy. He wasn't like in an Armani suit rolling in and, whatever. He was just a guy that was there. And they looked at him like he was the greatest guest they've ever had. And he said, when I went to the counter, I told him my name. And every time they spoke to me, they called me by name. Every time. He said, it was amazing. And I loved hearing my name. And I said, we all love hearing our name. And so he said, he looked at their blueprint. And then he asked for their manager, and he asked their manager to come and to teach the church staff how to be hospitable. And they did 10 weeks. Their Bible class was the Ritz-Carlton manager teaching. Now, some of you may think that's a lot, and I'm not telling you to do that, okay? And there was probably a lack of theological depth, but that wasn't the point in this particular class, right? So we're sort of on board. The point was teach people how to love people and teach them to come back to the Ritz-Carlton. Teach them to do that. And that's intriguing because all of us are always mindful of what we're walking into. There are reasons that you don't stay in certain hotels, isn't it? It's because you've stayed there once. There are reasons that you don't go to restaurants, isn't it? It's because you've eaten there once, or they never brought you your food, or whatever it may be. There's a reason you don't have a second kid. No, I'm just playing. Okay, but there's all kinds of stuff. There's reasons why you show up and then avoid showing up at all costs. Hey, there's reasons that you avoid people. Now, I know that doesn't happen in this church, but sometimes people will sit on this side of the building and the other people will sit on this side of the building because they don't want to engage because their engagements have been bad, let's say. And so there are reasons that we engage and come back, and there are reasons that we avoid completely. And so that's intriguing. So what we did was we sort of went down this road and we began to unpack how are these churches getting people to come in, fastest growing, and how are they building this longevity and sustainability, largest? Because again, there is a parameter, and you have all seen it, where churches will grow to 10,000 and then in a year they're gone. Have y'all seen some of that? Maybe even in this state, I don't know. Certainly in Nashville, it happens all the time. And so they're not on this list because there's no there's no proof of concept, right? There's no sustainability. You got 10,000 people in a room for a month and then you didn't. So, maybe you passed out $1,000 bills. I don't know, but that's not beneficial to sustainability and longevity. And so these churches figured out a way and are continuing to figure out a way to do it. And I would imagine that you in this church and visiting churches, you would like to figure out a way to get people in the door, but make sure they don't escape out the door as soon as they get a chance. And so how do you do it? Well, there's 5 things that we came up with that essentially deal with this. Now, all of this, as you know, is all under the umbrella still of this systemic process. Absolutely. And these already spokens, okay? So I'm going to keep that up there because I tell people in these lectures, if you don't remember anything, I want you to definitely remember this. Because it'll help you with a lot of conversations. It'll help you not to be, aggressive in your orality, but to be soft as a dove, to be peacemakers. Even if people are coming at you saying things that are not true or whatever, this will help me and maybe others perhaps to soften our tone and to just be mindful that they're coming with something that may or may not be true. And my job is not to convince them that I'm right. My job is to convince them to fall in love with Jesus. And so just be mindful of this. Now, the 5 themes that we found were intriguing, but made a huge difference. Number 1, first impressions. This is key. So every one of these churches that we visited, this is the highlight of all of them. Now, I want you to be mindful because I think you should know this. I think this is fair. The majority of these churches that we visited obviously have thousands of members, right? You can only imagine. And so, well, we don't, Drake. We have 500 people here, or whatever, 300 people, or whatever it may be. And so, what I've noticed is the stuff that I'm going to tell you and the stuff that we've implemented, the 300 to 350 is kind of the sweet spot. It just is. So you're kind of there. When we were in Ashland City, it was tough. When we got there, there were the first Sunday we started. This is the church that gave me a job because nobody else wanted to. And when we got there, we had 80 people, 80. Okay, and after 3 months, guess how many we had? Right, 55. And so, yeah, some of you, your faces are very judging. Thank you for judging me. And so I remember I sat down with one of our elders and I said, I thought I heard God whispering a small voice in my ear to come and preach. And actually it was him saying, stay away, stay away. And so I didn't know what to do. I didn't know why that was happening. But this is what this elder said. I got him Tim. He's still an elder. I love him to death, and he's a world changer. He's a big-time international salesperson, but he's also an elder in the church, and he's a world changer. And this is what he said. Drake, anytime you try to do something great, there's going to be people, especially that were here before you, and he always had to tell me that. Drake, you were not here first, but I want to do it this way. Fantastic. You were not here first. Yeah, but I don't like the old way. I know, but you were not here first. And somebody in this room needs to hear that. If you were not here first, your job is not to roll in here and change everything. Your job is to see the people that were here before you. That's number one, because that's key, because there's always pushback when you want to change the world. Always pushback. Always. And there's certainly going to be pushback if you want to change something that happens within the local church. And that could be anything. We want to move the Lord's Supper, to the beginning and the giving at the end. Well, someone's going to be like, well, in first opinions, you can't do that. Well, your job is not to argue that. Your job is to say, well, how have y'all done it? Well, we've had the giving after the Lord's Supper for 50 years, and I know that because I built the church building, and I don't want that to change. Well, your job isn't to respond in anger. Well, I think that's the dumbest thing, you big old dummy head. That's not your job. Your job is to say, well, how come y'all do it after the Lord's Supper? I mean, did anyone... And what they'll likely say is, well, because when we got here, that's how they were doing it. But they may say, well, because it's just easy. Everybody's already quiet. Everybody's already settled. The trays are already around. And then maybe you'll say, well, that's not a bad idea, actually. Is there any week, maybe, though, if we're giving attention to the Lord's Supper, maybe we separate them? Is there any room in your heart that maybe the reason I want to separate the Lord's Supper and the giving is because I want people to know that they're not really the same thing? And if a visitor comes in here, I want them to know that we value the blood and the body of Jesus more than maybe we value anything else. Is there just room in your heart for that? And usually they'll say, well, there's some room. And you'll say, well, that's a start. Now, let's not change anything for 3 months and we'll revisit this. Okay, so you got to be mindful of these impressions that are happening and what is to come. And people are not against people. They just need to make sure that they're heard and that they're seen. And so how does this work? Well, it starts all of this before anybody gets inside of your building, before they get inside. And this is the part that takes effort. So I don't know if you've ever driven around and you've looked at buildings that have been built in the last 3 years, but they don't look like a church building at all, do they? Like, I don't know if they have them here, but they don't even look like church buildings. Like, you kind of look at the sign and be like, well, is that an Apple store? No, it's a church. Okay. And so they're doing that on purpose. And we're going to talk about aesthetics because that is actually a component regarding statistics of bringing people in the door. Whether you like it or not, doesn't matter. Whether I like it or not, doesn't matter. It's just a key component. And so one thing that you need to be mindful of is the first impression is not just the people, but it's the place. And so if I want to be a world changer and I want to change something with all of the ambiguity that comes with communication, all the elusiveness, I need to be mindful. Okay, so when someone is driving on the interstate, which you guys are just right here. I mean, you're next to Cracker Barrel. This is a big deal. Okay, so, well, it is. I mean, that's good. So what you guys need to do, or what a church might consider doing, let's say, is you want to make sure your signage is seen by everybody. Everybody. You need big, bright signage, okay? And that's a good thing. I don't know if there's billboards around, but if they're around, you need to buy them and put where you're at. You just need to do that, okay? And you need to have a member help pay for that, or whatever it may be, because that may be the ministry that the member's never done. Hey, we're looking to buy a billboard. We want you to do this for us, and, that's fine. We don't need you to get on the stage. We don't need you to do that. We just want you to buy a billboard and take care of it. Oh, I didn't know I could do that. Yeah, you can do that and serve Jesus and whatever. Okay, but you need signage. When people are rolling into the parking lot, they need to see some of your members out there. Now, this is true for any churches. It's just true. So we went from 80 people to 65 people. And this elder kept saying, just keep focusing on God. Don't worry about anything. Just keep focusing. Well, my ideas are dumb. What church of 65 people has people in the parking lot showing them where to park? There's only one itty bitty area to park. It's not like you could park in our overflow. We don't have overflow at all, but they need to see you and feel you and experience you. And so we would have people out there with signs, park here. And it was almost superfluous. Like, we know because it's in front of us, right? But the idea is they see you taking the effort to do something, and it's unique. We'll tell more of that story, but eventually in about 3 years, we grew to 350. And so how do you do that in a dying town? Well, you do some of what I'm trying to tell you. How do churches from 350 grow to 10,000? You do the things that I'm trying to tell you. So you need to have people outside. And again, this is the part people don't like. The first people that people see, you just need to be mindful of that. Is that fair? You don't need your mean people out front. Is that okay to say? You need your happy people. You just do. And so I bet there's no mean people in this church, this congregation, but maybe there are. And you need to avoid interaction. You need to hide them in rooms somewhere. No, you don't. But you need to be mindful that sometimes the people, this is tough to say, but I've grown up in churches and I've led churches, and so it always happens this way. It's like the one person that you don't want the visitor to meet first is always standing there, and you're like, how do I stop this? Well, you have to be mindful that everybody has a place and everybody has a purpose and everybody is loved and everybody is made in the image of God. But some people were meant to be in the image, in a closet somewhere than out front. So how do we sort through that pragmatically without offending? Because we certainly don't want to offend or limit someone's potential. Well, the way we've done it is we're sort of mindful of asking people first that we think would make the biggest splash. Hey, do you think that you'd be willing to stand outside today? It's nice. It's 75. We just kind of want you to be in the parking lot. And hey, if you want to hold this sign, this may be a neat sign. Well, what's the sign say? It just says "First time here?" ? And people that are the first time here, they're going to come to you. And the reason we want you to hold this sign is we want them to meet you. Well, why would you want them to meet me? Because you're amazing. You're wonderful. And this is not a male or female job necessarily, but I've learned that girls are the best at this because ladies know how to talk way better than men know how to talk. It's why men talk 15,000 words per day, except my wife would argue that I don't fit that standard. And women talk about 35,000 words a day. Okay, so that's more than double. And all the husbands said amen. All right, so you need to have people that are out there willing to talk. In other words, you don't need someone that doesn't know how to communicate or how to sort of speak, especially about the church. If they walk in and you're holding a sign that says, "Are you new?" and they say, "Hey, I am new," you don't need someone there saying, "Oh, okay." Because that freaks people out. You also don't need negative people at the door or in the parking lot. "I can't believe y'all came to church here." Don't have those people. Or have the person that says to the person that's come back after 3 weeks, "Well, we hadn't seen you in weeks. I can't believe you're back. Where have you been? Been about 3 weeks since you've been here. Something going on." Those people need to be hiding somewhere, okay? Preferably in a locked room. So please avoid, that was a joke, by the way. Please avoid having those people out front. We had a system. We had 2 individuals who I love so much, and they're going to be in heaven, but I didn't want them at the front door. And so we had a system where we would make sure that those individuals had a job while people were coming in. And that's just the best way to do it. And I don't know how, some of you may not like this already, and I'm sorry, but we're trying to make a splash somewhat. And so if that is the case here, which some of you, as soon as I said, "Do y'all have any people that are like that?" many of your heads started bobbling. And so as long as you don't point, that's okay. But you might consider giving them a job that is less in front, if that makes sense. And give people that need to be more in front, give them that opportunity. Listen, when it's raining, you need to have people out there with umbrellas every Sunday. You don't want to do it. You don't want to get wet. It's cold and gross, but you want that person to know, but this is home for you, and we love each other at home. And so you get out there and you do it. That's not an age job. That's not a gender job. It's just a helpful job. And so imagine people pulling in and 2 or 3 members going to their car, whether they're members or not. I think you should do this, but especially the people that are going to be parked in the area of new people. Meeting them with an umbrella, because what if they didn't bring an umbrella? Or what if they only have one umbrella and they've got 3 kids? And that's a whole nightmare, because the mom or the dad's always going to let the kids get dry, and then they're going to be wet. And if they're wet and they sit down, they're going to be uncomfortable. If they're uncomfortable, they're going to be cold and miserable. And then the way that they view this church is, oh, that was the worship that I was miserable in. And they won't remember the singing or the worship or the preaching. They'll remember they were cold and wet and miserable. That's it. And unfortunately, that's on you, and it's not fair, but it's just true. And so how do you avoid that? First impressions. Meet them at the door. There's a church in Atlanta, which is number 2 in the nation, and they have figured out a way to have 6 checkpoints of people before you enter into their building. 6 checkpoints. You engage with 6 groups of people before you come into the building. I'm saying that intentionally on purpose. I want you to hear that. Because a lot of times, the first interactions you have with the church is when you walk into the auditorium, or even when you walk into the lobby. It's like, well, good morning, nice to see you, et cetera, et cetera. Where do I need to go? Blah, blah, blah. Imagine talking to 6 groups of people before you even come inside. And by the way, they will determine what they think about this church when you do that before they come inside. And that could be an amazing opportunity for this congregation, couldn't it? And amazing. So what does that look like? Well, you've got people at the entrance that are basically just the welcomers. They're just there waving. And I know for some of y'all, maybe that sounds crazy, or maybe, well, that's just churches that have 30,000. It doesn't have to be. Imagine this coming Sunday, or maybe give it a week so I can not be here so they can see I want them to see the normal. I'm not normally here. But imagine in 2 weeks, you just have people out there with welcome signs, and they're just there waving. They're just there to say hello, and we're glad you're here. That means a lot. It just does. I mean, it's the Disney concept, right? I got to sit down with a Disney exec and talk about how they do what they do. And like 90% of what they do is this sort of engagement with the people that come in. Not even the rides is more important than the people. And that's bizarre so imagine that's number 1. And then number 2, as they're pulling in, you've just got people holding signs, or people waving, or people saying, are you a visitor? Are you, are you a member here? Or you have children? Just different things. And people will come to you and say, hey, where do I park? Et cetera, et cetera. Again, a lot of people already here will know where to park. It's just more engagement, because what I've noticed is there's members that have been in churches for 10 or 15 years that don't talk to anybody. And it's because they need someone to come up and talk to them first. And that's not bad. That's just their personality. Some people are that way. I'm not that way. I'm a little bit different, but that's okay. So figure that out, okay? And then you have someone waiting right by cars. If there's a rain situation or whatever it may be, or you see someone struggling to grab all the backpacks and all the Bibles, and you just go out there and help them. Hey, let me help you. No problem, right? Again, that's not going to be uncomfortable, because the people that are doing that are your happy, good, wonderful, warm people. It's not like, you send some crazy people out there and, hey, let me have your bag. That's not the point. The point is, I'm here to help you. Once they get to the sidewalk, you're meeting them on the sidewalk. Why? Because you're trying to present this not as a building, but as a home. That's the goal. And so when you meet them in the parking lot and they know where to park, it's like when you drive home, you know where to park your car, don't you? I bet most of you have your spot, right? This is my spot and this is their spot, and it makes you feel home. People need to know this is their home. This is not just a building. This is their home. Their Father lives in this house. That's the mentality. And so you give people the opportunity to know where they park when they get here, and then you have family members out to meet them. The way I like to say it is, when we would go to Mama and Papa's house, or Uncle Jeff's house, or Uncle Dale, especially Uncle Jeff and Aunt Laura, because Aunt Laura was the best at this. When we would pull into their driveway in Oklahoma City and then later Dallas, Aunt Laura and Uncle Jeff would always run out to meet us, because we only saw them one time a year, and we adored them. I mean, Uncle Jeff and Aunt Laura were the best, and they would always come out to meet us. It's not like we traveled all that distance to come to a place we rarely come. Does it sound like church to some people? And we had to sit there and knock on the door and just wait. Okay, hopefully they're home. Okay, because that would be so uncomfortable. But they literally run outside, and here we are. Let me get your bags. How was your trip? How you doing? Tell me something about your life. How's sports going? Like, it was the whole thing. And that was before we entered into the house. Does that make sense? That was before we got there. I loved Jeff and Laura before I walked into the house. And when I got in there and they showed me everything that they have, I was like, I'm never leaving this place. That's the mentality you want people to have. I'm never leaving home. Because this ain't a church. This is my home. or for the most part, this is my new home. This is where we're going to live until we get to live in heaven. And it's very, very simple techniques, and it's all about the first impression. And so by the time you talk to them and all of these checkpoints and you meet them on the sidewalk, then they come in and they love everything about this church already. They don't know a whole lot about it, except for maybe some of the already spokens, but if they're bad, you've already negated all of those, haven't you? If people show up and they're like, that's a bunch of cold people that think they're the only ones going to heaven or whatever it may be, when they leave, they're going to say, look, I don't know if you've had a bad experience, and if you have, I'm sorry, but I mean, when I was at this church, they're amazing. Like they took care of me the whole time, and their worship was great, but that's not even what I remember. I remember how they took care of us and loved us and met us and took effort with us, and that's what you need to do. That is so telling to individuals. And as a visitor, y'all, when I would go to these different cities and be in these different churches, it was amazing, even my mood as a researcher and observer, how connected I felt with these churches that are thousands and thousands of people before I even walked into their lobby. I felt like I'd been there forever, like I knew people. And you know what was interesting? Within about 10 minutes or so of worship starting, all of this team would come inside. And you know what that would do for me? Well, those are my people. I know those people. So I'm not alone in the church anymore. I've already met 12 people. I may sit with these new family members that I have, and they're going to talk to me, and they're going to say, hey, we met at your car. Yeah, you did. Thank you for helping me, and whatever. And hey, do y'all want to sit together? I mean, yeah, I don't even know where to sit. This is crazy. Well, come sit with us. That's where you sit. We're family now. And you need to learn to use that terminology. You have to learn that it's okay to be loving, even in somewhat of a stoic personality. And that's not bad. Listen, some of the biggest pushback I get from the first impression comments is like, well, Drake, that's just not who I am. Well, good. We don't need you to be who you are. We need you to be who Jesus is. And so, Drake, I don't like to just smile and look at people and ask them if they need help. Well, good. You don't have to like it. I didn't like making my bed either as a kid, but I did it. And so learn to get over yourself. And I mean that respectfully, but get out of your own way so that Jesus can shine into the world. I mean, we've got to learn that. And so then they come into your building and they're tickled pink about this. I mean, that's all they're talking about before anything. And then they get in here, and again, people are always looking for direction. They don't like to not know where stuff is. And so what I tell churches is, if you want to, you need to invest in signage, and you need to do that immediately. People always want to know a few things. They always want to know where the bathrooms are, because no one wants to ask where they are. Did you know that? You know why? Because we don't want you to know where we're going. I'm just going to be walking over here. They don't want to have to go up to a stranger who they've never met and say, where's the potty? That's uncomfortable, okay? And so, well, yeah. And so avoid that and make sure they know where that is with signage. Again, signage is still communication, right? It is this unique systemic process of integrating, all right? So integrate them with what you offer in this place, and do that with signage, especially for people that aren't going to be comfortable, right? So imagine someone uncomfortable not using the bathroom and sitting in a pew for 90 minutes. They're not going to come back, I promise you that, because it's uncomfortable. So you need to do that. You need to have signage to tell people where they're supposed to go. Now, you'll have people that will help with that, and that's good, and your people that are in those groups will be good too. I always tell churches, when I think about the lobby team especially, or the team outside, you need to have different generational groups there, always. This is not a job for your young people. This is not a job for your old people. This is not a job for your pretty people, or whatever. You need to have different groups so that everybody that gets in the parking lot, they will see a version of themselves. Does that make sense? And so you need to have older people, because older people need to see themselves coming in. You need to have younger people, because younger people need to see themselves coming in. When a parent with kids sees other kids at the door, they automatically think, I think our kids could like it here. They don't care about what is offered. They just know that my kids have people that they're same sizes, and so they're going to be good. And so you need to be mindful about how you present that on top of all of that. So those people, as they're sort of walking in, they're going to be saying, now your kids look about my kid's age, or you look like you're, in my group. Let's all sit together. But even still, you need to have signs. So you need to have signs in this area out here. You do whatever you want to do, but you might consider signs that tell people where to go. This is the college class, a big sign, college class, a big sign with a kids corner. I think that should be colorful. Every church we went to, their kids area was painted in vibrant colors. Every single one of them. Now, some people may think, well, that's just a waste of money and that's dumb and nobody cares. Yes, they always care. 50%, 50 of all generations, as far as I can tell, and this is all the way back to the silent generation. Our research took it way back. That is a part of the major part of why they come to a church and feel safe at a church is the young people. That's always the question. Y'all got young people here? Y'all got a youth group here? Y'all got kids here? That's always the question. Most people don't walk in and say, hey, y'all got instruments up there? I mean, because most of us, if we walk into the church, we assume that you don't, but they will say, y'all got kids here? And so what if they didn't have to ask that? Because they walked in and they saw a giant neon sign that said kids corner or kids area or whatever. I'm telling you, that makes, there's a church in Denver. This was bizarre. Had nothing to do with their kids corner either. But in their lobby, they bought a McDonald's slide. Okay, y'all know like the playhouses at McDonald's that, probably kids died on back in the day. They had these huge slide in their lobby. It was not inside their kid area. It was in the lobby. Y'all know why they put it in their lobby? Because when a parent saw that, they were like, they must have a big young kid group here. It was not attached, but it was out in front because they wanted people to know we have kids here. And if you have kids, you belong with us. It was amazing. It was painted bright and it was the whole thing. So you have to figure out a way to communicate these types of things without necessarily using words, this nonverbal communication that tells people your people fit here. And you can be creative, right? But again, the kid atmosphere in churches is huge, and it needs to go beyond just a kid making noise in the auditorium, right? Because most of the time when people hear that, they're not like, oh man, they got kids here. Okay, they hear that in a negative light. So give them a slide, give them colors, do something. Further, it allows the kid to feel safe. Because imagine what it's like when you get in the car after visiting this church for the first time and your children say, Mom, I want to go back to that church. Because if the mom was sort of on the fence, you know where she's at now? She's back here Sunday because her kids loved it. And so you need to be mindful of that. You need to be mindful that this is all first impressions. Everything that you do, everything that you put up, they're seeing and reading or they're not. And you don't want to be the reason that people feel lost, because if they feel lost in a building, they feel awkward, and people don't typically come back for more awkwardness. We avoid awkwardness. So do something to make sure that people know this is your class, this is our class. Don't just be creative with how you do that, right? Be fun with it. Make it something more, okay? This doesn't matter, but I'm going to say it anyway. When people arrive Sunday morning, well, let's say it like this. Every Sunday you're going to have church, okay? And that's good because that's biblical. Make sure that you're prepared for people to be here. The outside ought to look like you're prepared to have people here. And so I don't know what that may mean, but the outside needs to be prepared to have people here. The inside needs to be prepared to have people here. Don't take that lightly. Don't take a week off. Don't get flustered and assume that stuff will get done, or, well, someone didn't chime in, so we'll just figure that out later. Don't be lazy regarding the church. And I say that with a real amount of kindness, but sometimes people respond to this with, well, Drake, I just don't know that people really care about that stuff. And I would argue that whether I do or not, statistics speak for themselves. And so be mindful of, number one, who you have out front. Have your happy people. Have your people that love this place. I mean, do y'all love worshiping here at this congregation? I mean, do you love it? when was the last time you went to an elder and said, I just need to tell you, I love this church. I just love it. Don't love you a lot, but love the church. Whatever you need to say, right? You need to have those people in front. And it's not going to be an elder because they're too busy making sure the flock is what it needs to be. It's going to be people that can't help but to be exuberant and joyful about the church. They can't help but to tell people, man, when y'all get inside that building, it's amazing. How long have y'all been here? We've only been here a year, but we're never going anywhere. Have those people, and then make sure that you take strong attention of allowing people to see your people outside of these walls, bring them in together, because that's such a good thing to do. And then when they get in here, make sure they know where they're going. Pretend like no one can speak, but yet everybody would figure it out. And I'm not going to lie, when I got here today, I wasn't 100% sure where to park, and that's okay. That's not a bad thing. I just wasn't 100% sure. I was looking for a spot that said, new people, or what I did was, I don't like the word visitor or member. I'm just not a big fan. What I call them is family members or future family members, because I don't have visitors into my home. I have future family members. And so I might have a spot out there that says future family members, and people will see that and like, man, that's pretty good. This is neat. Okay. And so I didn't see my future family spot out there, and maybe I missed it. It probably is out there, but I paid attention to that I wasn't 100% sure what door I was supposed to go into, and that's fine. And when I got into the building, everybody was there. People were just there, the whole crew, everybody happy and smiling, and here you are. But I would have loved to meet some of y'all outside, and that's all I'm saying. I would just love just a little bit more. Seems to go a long way, especially if people are on the fence about making this their home or not. The second thing that we learned is inclusion. And a part of that is, if you have the book, it's also inclusion and investing. And so this is again, these 5 principles are what all of these 10 churches took the most seriously. And so that's this concept of inclusion. Now, I think churches do this well, but when I sat down with one of the leaders of the largest church, the church in Oklahoma City, what he told me is, our goal is to have 90% of our members doing something. 90%. Most churches, even most businesses, will say that 20% do 80% of the work. Have you ever heard of the 20% rule and the 20-80 rule? Well, I hope that's not what you want in this congregation. We just need 20% of y'all to do something, and the rest of y'all just sit quiet. Okay, but I sometimes think that is how it goes. And sometimes, and I mean this again respectfully, sometimes that's not the leader's fault. Are there any members here today? Sometimes it's your fault. And it's because you don't mind just rolling in and sitting down and taking it all in. And that's okay. But you need to do more than that. If you want the church to be more, you've got to be more. If you want the church to be more vibrant, you might be more vibrant. If you want the church to be more joyful and exuberant, you might consider being more joyful and exuberant. If you want the church to do this particular ministry, why don't you be the person to start that ministry? I love sitting in ministry meetings over the years and someone saying, "No, I wish one day we could do this." And I always say, that is a great idea. When would you like to start? Well, I mean, I'm just here giving ideas. Well, don't be that person, okay? So if you want the church to be something more, we'll help with that. And then leaders, especially elders in the room, I say in particular, your job is to make sure that everybody has a way to be a part of this inclusion. Everybody has a way. And that's on you, guys, those of you that are elders. And I used to say I never want to be an elder because it's the hardest job in the world. Because of how much time and energy and prayer and oftentimes elders that I know, emotional pain that they have to deal with because the elders' mentality is always, we're so close, we just don't know how to get just beyond that. And so this is how you get beyond it. You build jobs for every person, and this is every person, because if someone has a job, they show up, and if someone doesn't have a job, they don't. That's just true. And so you need to make not only everybody have a job, but you need to make sure that everybody knows their job is as important as everybody else's. And if they don't do their job, this home can't be a home. And you've got to sell that as best you can. Without you, we're nothing. With you, we're going to change the world. And I don't know exactly how that looks for this church, but every person needs to know that they're needed. Psychologists and sociologists say it like this. A sociologist says, the number one thing in life that we all have is we all have a need to be needed. Psychologists say the number one way to tell someone that you love them is to look at them and say, I need you. And so put that into church work. I need you. Well, what do you need me to do? Well, tell me something about your interest. These churches that we looked at, when they have new people come, these future family members or visitors or whatever they call them, the first thing they try to do is get them in a class. And I'm not telling you to do this, it's fine, but they get them in a class and they all take personality tests, every one of them that's there. And they do this because they're trying to learn, what does this person bring to the table, as opposed to what we've traditionally done. Hey, do you teach Bible class? Yeah, well, I'd like to sign you up for the next 40 years. Okay, well, that's true, and you can't do that because that's not the way to lead. That's the way to fill a role that you need filled. Right? Or, hey, do you pass trays out? Well, anybody can pass a tray. But what they do is they're not, again, it's the same concept, I guess, of trying to give people roles and positions, but they let the person's personality in some ways dictate, what field they're going to be a part of. And this is good. And so if you have, if you're more of an extrovert and you're more high energy, well, your job may be you're just the guy holding the sign outside. And by the way, you're the first person they're going to see. And so you have the most important job of anybody in this church. Well, that sounds like I'm needed, doesn't it? That sounds like something I may want to do. Well, you're very introverted and you're a little negative, and the results show that you're kind of a half empty person, glass half full person. And so, I think you'd be a great counter during class. You don't have to talk to anybody. Most people don't see you, but you have the most important job in this church because we need to know how many people are here. Does that make sense? And you make sure that people know that. Okay, your job is to go around and your job. We used to do this at Ashland City. We had 2 people that did this. When church is over, your job is to stand in the front as we're sort of wrapping up, like we've said the amen, and your job is to look for people that don't have at least 2 people they're talking to. And I put that in place because I wanted that to be in place. And then it sort of snowballed into, well, there seems to be always people talking, Drake. And I'd say, well, what I want you to do this week is I want you to see if the people that are talking, if they're always talking to the same people. And you know what we learned in churches? You typically always talk to the same people. Isn't that interesting? Always. You park by the same people, you sit with the same people, you eat with the same people, and you complain about the same people. Okay, so their job then was to go and talk to the people that seemed to sort of always only be in their group. And it wasn't a clique. I'm not against cliques. I think cliques can be a good thing. I think I would reword it as a communicator to say that there's groups of more love than less love, but nevertheless, your job is to step in. So we literally had people in our auditorium, and their job was to look for the people that needed others to talk to. And I'm going to tell you what, y'all, I wasn't blowing smoke, but when I presented it to these 2 people, I said, listen, if you do your job right, we're going to double in size. And they were fired up about that. These are people that love the Lord, but probably couldn't quote John 3:16. But in their mind, they were the greatest Christians, the most needed people in the world. And we did. We doubled a few times, incidentally. So you've got to give people jobs, but you've got to make sure it's jobs that fit. And personality tests are one way. Another way is just to sit down and say, look, how can we serve you and get you in a position where you can better serve this congregation? I mean, have you ever asked someone that? What's a way that you could serve best in this congregation? As opposed to, you mind doing the Lord's Supper today? I mean, imagine different wording, right? How, if you could pick one job in serving in the church, what would it be? And number one, you're going to find out that there's jobs that are not being done that people are willing to do. And it's like, I didn't even know we could do that. Number two, you're going to have people that can do things right away. You just didn't know because you never asked. You were too busy telling them what you wanted to do to know exactly how God built them to serve. And I'm not saying you, I'm just saying in general. Maybe you need to give people a voice. And sometimes within voice, you do that with inclusion. And it's interesting. I'll never forget when we started doing this years ago, in our little church, there was this lady. She was one of our widows, and I was told by my papa years ago, if you want to stay in a church, in a congregation, he stayed at Roebuck Parkway for I think it was 43 years, and died. I mean, he stopped working because he died, and he'd say, you've got to find a way to connect to the widows. You've got to do that. And I remember as a kid being like, well, yeah, that's fine. And then I got into ministry, and there's like this thing that the widows were the meanest ladies in the church. And I don't believe that's true at all. But they had this already spoken concept, right? And by the way, some of you that are talking to the widows, you need to stop it. All right. So I thought, well, I don't know why that is. And I have a personality where I don't like to take people for their word. I like to figure it out. And so I began to meet with our widows, and there was this lady that I learned basically was the queen of the widows, and I called her that. It was like all roads went through her, and a lot of the things we did in church, incidentally, went through her. The reason we didn't change things went through her. The reason we did change things went through her. And I thought, I need her in my life, or I'm going to be miserable if we don't like each other. And the first encounter we had, God help her, she's still alive. The first encounter we had, she said, I don't like you. And I said, you don't? Why? And she said, I don't need my preacher up there moving around and laughing and making all that noise. Just preach the Bible. And I said, I'm sorry. I think you're right. Sometimes my personality's a little much. I'm going to do my very best to be better. And I said, is there anything that I could do, because you've been here a long time, is there anything I could do from the pulpit that might serve you better? That was hard for a 24-year-old, hotshot to say. And she said, I want you to try to not joke as much in the pulpit. And I said, can you tell me why? I'm not saying that's bad. Can you tell me why? And she said, because, Drake, we're not here to see you. We're here to see Jesus. And I said, okay, I think that's fair. What I learned was she didn't care how I preached in the pulpit. The preacher before me was one of her and her husband that died, one of his best friends. And you know why she didn't like me? One reason. I wasn't him. So I could be mean and mad, and I could keep the narrative going about widows are the worst people in the church and they're just mad all the time. Or I could be creative and come up with a plan. And so that I did. How do we include people that in some ways in their own mind think their ministry is over because they've done it for years? And in the lives of the church members, they sort of think they're just the old people in the back. All of our widows sat in the back, incidentally, which all on the back 2 rows. And we weren't allowed to sit in the back when I was growing up or whatever. All right, so I started this thing and I thought, I wonder what they miss. And I thought, I bet they miss dating, because I love dating. I love going out with my wife. So I thought, I'm going to ask the widows out on a date. And I know how that sounds, but I needed a way to meet this, right? I needed a way to include them, because again, inclusion is not just getting someone to take care of the worship time, is it? They got to know they're home. You're not just home on one day of the week. And so I started a ministry called A Date with the Preacher, and I sent out dates to them, like actual invitations. Will you go out with me? Do you like me? Checkbox, yes or no. I didn't write that part. And so I told them, we're going to meet at this fish place, and I'd love for you to go. And we did. And the first time, every widow showed up, every one of them. It was me, and I think at that time, we were pretty small then. I think it was like me and 8 ladies. And we all walked into this place. I'm 24 and they're not. And we rolled in here, and the looks that people gave us, and I remember the waitress came over and said, now, who's your grandmama? That's what she was trying to, because there was no way that it could be anything else. And I responded with my playful self, well, none of these are my grandmamas. These are my dates. And even one of the widows didn't like that joke, right? But it was like, that's okay with me. And we giggled and we laughed. And y'all, we did that for 2 years. We did every quarter, every 3 months we did it. We just kept doing it for years and years and years until, of course, COVID shut it down. But when I would get to church, you know what? The same people that didn't like me, the widows, because I was too playful or too jokey or not the old guy that was a little more buttoned up and always tucked his shirt in and always wore a tie, and that's just not who I am, and that's okay. I'm not against that at all. I'm for suits and ties, and you want to preach in a tux, knock yourself out, but I'm just a little less of their style. They adored me, and it had nothing to do with what happened on Sunday, but everything that happened on Monday. Because you include people. And so you've got to figure out a way to include people, man. I'm not saying, leave here and, everybody pick a widow and take her out. You could. I'm fine with that. But what I'm saying is find ways to make people know that's my family. Because you don't leave family. You ever had a member leave this church before? We don't leave family. And so give them a reason to stay. And often it's not by singing a particular song or avoiding singing a particular song. It's often not because the sermon series was great that particular season. And even a big part of this, as much as I push this constantly, is it's not necessarily the ministries or the kids. It's they stay because they're family. And so don't be lazy with family. Marriages, men especially, we get lazy. My wife and I have been married almost 15 years. I sometimes don't pursue her the way I did when we met at Fried Hardeman. And someone may say, well, you don't have to pursue her anymore. You married her. Like, that's how that works. And that is often the way that we treat marriage, isn't it? But you don't think she likes to be pursued now? How about this? You think God wants to be pursued? Well, I've been a Christian my whole life. God wants you to pursue him. God wants you to seek him with your whole heart so that you'll find him. And so people in this church, members and visitors alike, they want to be pursued a little bit. And they want to know that you need them to be here. They want to know that they're included. They want to know that when they miss one Sunday, the church and the home was not what it usually is. And when you speak to those truths, you don't call people and say, missed you this week, what's going on? Where you been? Heard you had a soccer tournament, prayed for you choosing soccer over Jesus. You can't do that. You may reach out to someone and say, I wanted to call you today and just tell you that in class, I noticed that one of my family members was missing, and I just want you to know I love you. That's all. You don't want to ask me where I was? Mm-mm. You don't want to ask me why I skipped? No, I just want to tell you that I miss my family member and I love you. And I'm telling you, it makes all the difference. These little things, because the reality is when you do that, sometimes you're hurting way more than you're helping. Because who knows what happened that Sunday? Who knows what happened in that home that night before? Who knows what's going on in the kid's life? And who knows what's going on in the marriage? Who knows what's going on in their internal faith? Maybe they're walking away from God and nobody knows it because nobody sees them, and they're walking away from him primarily because they don't feel like they're included. And so it's little itty-bitty things that I think will help us. And I'm here to tell you, man, these churches that we visited, it was amazing to see how much they came up with people to do. I'll end with this. We were at a Chick-fil-A in Dallas last week, or two weeks ago, and when we got to the door, there was a greeter at the door. And this is a Chick-fil-A. Did I say that? Not a fast food chain. And she said, "How many are in your party?" I said, "There's 4 of us." Never been asked that at Chick-fil-A. I mean, I didn't even know that. She said, you can come with us. And she sat us down. Now, I know Dallas is a little uppity, but she sat us at this little table. And then she said, I'll go ahead and take your order now. And she took our order. And we didn't go to the counter. There were people at the counter, but not us. And I thought she must have read my book. No. And so we sat down and took our order, and it was a whole thing. And she said, I know y'all have kids. They can play in the playpen. The order should be out in about 10 or so minutes, and that'll be fine. This, that, and the other. Brought us the order of everything. Brought us the Polynesian sauce, because that's my favorite, and drinks and napkins and the whole thing. Brought us little mats for the girls. They have those little sticky mats just in case we needed it, the whole thing. And it was just amazing. And so I looked at her and I said, I've never been at a Chick-fil-A that, like, I mean, this is like a restaurant. I was like, it's amazing that y'all are doing this. And she said, she was asking, where are you from? I was like, Nashville, this, that, and the other. And I said, I've just never seen this. And she said, well, this is pretty new. And I said, oh, it's pretty bougie. I'm not going to lie. And I love to use that word because it makes me feel young. And so I said, it's pretty bougie. And she said, well, one of the things that we do every quarter is we always try to find ways to make our customers say, that's amazing. And I thought, when was the last time even I walked into a church and said, now that was amazing? God, help us to be amazing by showing people that we take effort and time into pouring into them so that they can get into this room and pour into you. We love you, God, and we love Jesus. And it's in his name we pray, and amen. Okay. I don't know what... Do you want to end it, or do you want to say something? Yeah.
Don't have to rush out, but yeah, stick around. And, this is great. Everybody can get to know each other. I'll say a prayer for the food. And our Father, Lord, we thank you so much for this time and for coming to speak with us. And Lord, thank you for everyone here. Pray to help us to take these things to heart, so that we can have a bunch of people and want to reach them. And we pray that you will bless the church and bless our work. We love you so much. Thank you for the food we have. And please just guide and direct us in all things. And let's help us in Jesus' name.
Every tomorrow, class at 9.
Yes, tomorrow.
7 through 7.
Yes, 7 straight up being here tomorrow at 9, and then regular worship at 10.
Cool. 7 we're going through the next 3.
Yeah, and I'm in to do this, but we'll do 3 and then we'll do some questions in class. But I'm in to do that next time. Get you guys set up.
Thank you all. Okay.